and very assertive in the goals that you put for them. And you guys as a board run a first-class show, and I'm want to tell you that. Because I'm sure all what you hear is how things are horrible. You don't hear from the people who are sitting and appreciating the results of your work. Thank you.
I think
Thank
I
you.
speak for all of
Thank
us
you.
in
Well,
thanking
yeah,
you.
thank
and
you.
Thanking you for the work you do in the community.
Yeah. Well, one thing, for sure, when Gabe's involved, it's facts and science, not tradition or hopeful outcomes. So we appreciate your comments.
Mr. and Mrs. Loomis, would you like to come forward? As before, please begin with your names and address, and then you can go ahead. I'm sorry, would you state your name and your address to begin with? Please give us your name and address.
Each of them needs to have a mic.
Thank you. Thank you. Our last visit with you on July 24th, I just want to wish you good evening to President Sherry White and all the honorable members of the board and the staff. So Stuart now is going to take over and speak with my remarks.
Good evening, Honorable Board and attending staff of the district. The background to what we need to say briefly tonight, you have on your file, and from what we presented, and particularly Rosalind Loomis presented at the meeting 3 weeks ago. We are here again on the Matters from the Floor agenda to bring forward our concerns on an enforcement matter involving floodplain fill of a substantial nature, which was done without Minnehaha Creek District Permitting Authority on the next door property at number 60 Crabapple Lane, and occurring precisely on the 60 Crabapple Lane side of our common north-south oriented property line. To quote from Rosalind's July 24th presentation, specifically, we wish to request this matter involving Rosalind Loomis will be identified as a topical agenda item for the board's next meeting scheduled for Thursday, August 28th, 2025. The intent will be to seek clarification from the district regarding the district's decision made in December 2024, actually late November, and notified to us on December, where substantial floodplain fill had occurred in the year 2020, very definitely that year, not 2019 as stated in the report, in the closure report, for which there has been, we believe, inadequate enforcement without addressing the required mitigating and substantial alterations to negate the violating floodplain fill. With regard to Mrs. Loomis's July 24th request for inclusion on the board's agenda tonight, that request was denied with the very late messaging by email from Mr. Whisker on Monday evening of this current week at 9 o'clock, roughly 8:54 in the evening. We have tried for months since our U.S. Postal Certified Mail was presented to President White and dated December 15th, 2024, for our public issue to be included on the board's agenda, repeatedly asking it in various forms in writing and through telephone calls with with district staff. But with these repeated denials for board agenda inclusion, a major public question must be asked, and that question is, why is the board and the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District so reluctant to discuss within the district this important Lake Minnetonka floodplain fill regulatory matter, and in this particular public forum, and for this matter to be placed on the public record? There's been far too many private and restricted conversations on this without clarity on why the board the district made the decision it did on November 24th, 2024, and we would like to ask again that track record, that trail of documents that led to that decision, which we feel is totally inadequate within the board's rules and regulations. We would like to know why this matter is not being discussed in this kind of public forum, where we have enough time to really present some of the details that are particularly concerning to us in a public manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public who wish?
I think.
Oh, Mr. Whisker, did you want to add anything? No?
I
Okay.
think we should have some kind of response.
Manager Miller, President White, managers, I mean, I can just speak to the remarks that the Loomises made on record and just cover sort of.
Sorry.
Yep. Hopefully that's better. I can just make some remarks regarding the comments that the Loomises made. Is that better, Arun? All right. And just speak to the status of where staff are in our dialogue with the Loomises. So I think Mr. Loomis mentioned this in his remarks. We received an email from the Loomises copying the Board of Water and Soil Resources, asking for this matter to be included in tonight's agenda. This is something that the Loomises had requested at the last meeting that they attended as part of the matters from the floor. It asked to review documents related to the closeout of this matter from staff inspections that have been completed, and asked for a site meeting. And Mr. Loomis, I think, covered things pretty factually. I responded on Monday. It was after hours, about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. After consultation with President White, the matter's not been included as an agenda item. I think the board's fairly familiar that you referred this back to staff. I've committed and I responded in writing that I'd be willing to attend a site visit with the Loomises and inspect the property with them. I've been very accessible and engaged with them a number of times already, even since last year when they first made contact with me. And then with regards to the request for documents, to help them make sure that we provide the right documents and that the scope of their data request is clear, we've asked for some clarification so that we can pull together the documents that they're looking for. I think the board's pretty well read into the details with all of the correspondences that you've received from the Loomises, the staff memos, the letters that we've exchanged, the nature of the issue, and why we have considered it resolved. And that was communicated back to the Loomises in January following board discussion. But if you'd like me to recap that, I can do that as well.
Not necessary, but you have a meeting scheduled, a site visit scheduled?
I think so. I think I'm planning on being there Monday. I'm waiting to hear back from the Loomises. They wanted to review the documents first, which I think is their prerogative. We can't pull all the documents together until they clarify their data request. And so my simple question is, would you like to review the documents before a site meeting, or would you like me to come out Monday and get the documents later? Yeah, so I'm planning on. Yeah. I think. Yeah, I think to speak to that, and the board's familiar, we get requests for public data all the time, and those requests, if not clearly scoped, can be quite expansive. My understanding, and I stand to be corrected, is that the Loomises have requested information in the past, and staff have provided pieces of information that we've had because they've made specific requests. This request is broad and open with regards to 60 Crabapple Lane, and it could include, it's not defined, it could include all email correspondences on the matter, it could include the inspection notifications, it could include any communications we may or may not have had with the city of Tonka Bay or the landowners. And so we're just seeking to clarify so that we can make sure that you get the information you need. And we have not had a standing data practices request from the Loomises for a year. We have had constant engagement and had back and forth, and we have written letters and we have provided documents, but I'm treating this as an official request for data and wanting to know, what the full scope of information is that they're looking for so that we can be responsive to it in totality.
Thank you, Mr. Whisker. Yes, Ms. Loomis?
We have received official.
So we'll wait to
helpful.
have the documents clarified and the site visit and see where that goes.
I will,
Just to clarify,
okay, and I'll,
documents.
yeah, and now we're working together and you're asking me for them. I'm treating it seriously and we're going to go through it comprehensively. I know that we've, and so I will see you on site on Monday.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the public who wishes to address the board on the matter not on the agenda? Seeing no hands, I'll move to
No,
item.
she's got comments.
I'm sorry. Did you want to speak? It is. Yes, absolutely. I would like to suggest in approving the agenda that we delete item 12. It was here in case we would need it, but given that we have mediation next week, we talk with council about mediation. Unless someone has a burning desire, I think we can cross that off.
Thank you.
All right, then removing item 12, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Manager Olson, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Maxwell, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Ms. Johnson, for including the financial report in our information items. Moving to the consent agenda, there is but one item, which is approval of the minutes of the July 24th board meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Manager Hejmati moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Manager Sando seconds. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I have no meetings to report on, but I'll turn to you, Manager Loftus, for an Operations and Programs Committee report. Or Manager Olson. I know you weren't here the entire time.
Go ahead.
Quickly, this evening, we met with our communications department and discussed their progress and strategies moving forward. And it was a quick and productive meeting in regular communication with us, and we appreciate all.
Thank you. Are there any other meetings or events managers would like to report on? Then looking ahead, we have our standard published meeting and committee dates. And the CAC is meeting on the 17th, Manager Hejmati attending. Under permits, item 10.1, permit 25262, Ms. Couture reporting.
Good evening, President White and Board of Managers. Tonight, I will be briefing you on permit 25-262 for an in-kind culvert replacement proposed by the Three Rivers Park District between Lake Sumbra and Sunny in the city of Victoria. While this permit meets all applicable MCWD rules and is recommended for approval, the permit is before you this evening given the public interest in high water levels on Lake Sumbra and comments that we received during the public notice period. As the board is aware, MCWD doesn't own any of the infrastructure in question. However, over the last decade, MCWD has worked closely with the Department of Natural Resources, Carver County, the Three Rivers Park District, the City of Victoria, and landowners to study the system's hydraulics and offer guidance. Those historic investments to build shared understanding were useful throughout this permit process and helped facilitate constructive dialogue with the Zumbra Ridge Homeowners Association leadership and the Three Rivers Park District through the comment period, which I will outline later. For this evening, I will start with a project overview and outline how the project aligns with MCWD regulations. Then I will summarize the public comments and frame staff recommendation. I will then turn things back to President White and the board, who can receive any additional public comment this evening. beginning with the project overview. The project site is located within the 6 Mile Creek Halsted Bay subwatershed in the city of Victoria. Zooming in a little, the project site is outlined in the yellow box and is located on Three Rivers Park District land within the Carver Park Reserve. The project will consist of replacing the failing culvert between Lake Sumbra and Lake Sunny in kind. In the callout, which shows a close-up of the area between the two lakes, there is a bike trail, shown here in blue, that separates the two lakes, and the culvert is located underneath that bike trail. Based on the Three Rivers Park District's assessment, the existing culvert is past its serviceable life and is at risk of failing. To avoid an emergency repair, the Three Rivers Park District is proposing to replace it in kind, meaning that it will be set at the same slopes and elevations, use the same material, and be the same diameter. The proposed culvert will be located approximately 60 feet southeast of the existing to center it more in the channel opening to avoid future maintenance and clogging issues. Now moving on to the MCWD rule analysis for the 3 applicable rules for this project. Since the project involves excavation of soil, the erosion sediment control rule is applicable. To comply with rule requirements, the applicant is proposing floating silt curtains in areas down gradient of proposed disturbance, shown in green, as well as erosion control logs around stockpiles. The site will be stabilized by turf grass seed, river bulrush plugs in the shoreline, and erosion control blankets. Given that the project involves the replacement of a culvert, the water body crossings and structures rule is also applicable. The existing condition is a 50-foot long, 24-inch in diameter corrugated steel pipe. The culvert will be replaced in kind with the same materials and diameter and be set at the same inverts and slope. The location of the culvert will be repositioned slightly to the southeast to prevent future clogging issues. Hydraulic capacity will be retained, and the 100-year floodplain elevations upstream and downstream of the culvert will not change. Additionally, the project will preserve navigational capacity, wildlife passage, and not promote erosion or affect bank stability or water quality. MCWD staff and the district engineer have reviewed this rule and confirmed compliance. With the culvert replacement, there will also be work within the lake's floodplain to remove the existing culvert and place the new culvert. To meet the floodplain alteration rule, the applicant is proposing an equal amount of cut and fill between the ordinary high water level and the 100-year floodplain elevation, which meets our rule requirements. The cut and fill will be located in the same location, shown in blue. And to sum up all of the rule review, all MCWD rules are met. I'll now move into discussing the comments we have received from residents in the Zumbra Ridge neighborhood. During the public notice, MCWD received comments from 4 individuals, all residents in the Zumbra Ridge neighborhood. Feedback included questions on the project's effect on water levels, the culvert's longevity, and whether permitting has been coordinated with the DNR, all of which were answered. One resident's concerns regarded the effects of climate change on storm severity, coupled with past land use decisions for developments like Woodland Cove, seeking a more holistic solution to high water levels on Lake Zumbra. One individual called for the culvert to be replaced with a bridge, noting that they are prepared to legally oppose the project. Regarding the request for a bridge, we understand from the work completed with the Department of Natural Resources, Carver County, the City of Victoria, and the Three Rivers Park District in 2017, as well as the Three Rivers Park District's most recent modeling, that the expansion of the existing 24-inch in diameter culvert shown in red increases the 100-year floodplain elevation on Zumbra due to backwatering effects in the system. You can see on the graph that a 48-inch culvert shown in orange or a 6x4-foot box culvert shown in green both increase the 100-year floodplain elevation, which is shown on the y-axis. And a bridge, as requested, causes the greatest 100-year flood stage rise on Lake Zumbra, shown on the graph in blue. And finally, the Three Rivers Park District and MCWD received a request from the Zumbra Ridge Homeowners Association leadership that a flapgate or backflow preventer be considered. This was studied conceptually in 2017 and was estimated to provide between 0.5 and 0.75 feet of 100-year flood elevation reduction. Given the failing condition of the existing culvert, the Three Rivers Park District has determined it must proceed in the short term with the in-kind culvert replacement, but they have also communicated that they would remain open to receiving and considering a feasibility analysis of retrofitting a flap gate onto the proposed culvert. MCWD has relayed this to the City of Victoria, who was willing to lead feasibility analysis in 2016 before residents asked that the flap gate no longer be advanced. While those conversations are in motion, they are occurring in parallel and somewhat separate to the board's consideration of the in-kind culvert replacement this evening. To summarize what I have presented tonight, the project proposes the in-kind replacement of an existing culvert between Lakes Zumbra and Sunny. The permit is in front of the board tonight due to concerns by nearby property owners from historic flooding and high water levels on Lake Zumbra. Due to the imminent failure of the existing culvert, the Three Rivers Park District desires to move forward with the in-kind replacement, but is willing to review flapgate feasibility in the future if it is provided. The proposed project aligns with all applicable MCWD rules, and therefore, staff recommend approval of the permit. Thank you, President White and Board of Managers, for listening to this briefing on Permit 25-262. The applicant is present tonight, as well as members of the public who may wish to speak. And with that, I'll turn it back over to President White.
Thank you, Ms. Couture. Is there someone who wishes to address the board? Come forward. Welcome. Please begin by giving us your name and address.
Yes, my name is Dick Hawley, and I live at 5641 Zumbra Drive.
We've seen you before.
Yes, I have been here before. I past life was even a civilian volunteer with the WD. Lived now on the lake for 50 years. The home we purchased was from Dale Palmatier, who is, I think, a well-known member of CWD. A lot of what I initially learned about the lake came from interfaces with Dale, living in the house that he sold when he moved. He moved up just a little ways away. So I've been heavily involved, and from the association standpoint, there were many times that I was involved with what's happening with our flooding, what's happening with our water levels, what's happening with invasive species and so forth. Quite active. Goes on. One of my concerns is that from an historical standpoint, Lake Zumbra and Sunny are a single lake. And one of my concerns here is that we are talking about a crosswater body structure that was put in place back in the late 60s, early 70s from a farmer who owned the property prior to the park being involved. And that still exists. That causeway that he put in to get from one side to the other exists. That is despite the DNR ruling that says that there cannot be cross-water body structures that are put on any single lake. Especially they interfere with riparian rights, the access is restricted by what's going on with the causeway on that single lake. It also imposes other problems from fish passage and other aspects. I'm the one who wrote to say that we should oppose what's going on by coming back through. Early in the life, we recognized that this was a problem, and the DNR had recently passed their ruling on crosswater body structures. But there were some other prevailing things that happened during that period of time where the residents were trying to cooperate with the park. And that came down to the use of the Sunny Bay on the lake as a nesting reserve for the trumpeter swans. So there was a joint process that went with the DNR and with the park to try to revive the trumpeter swans and provide an environment to be able to foster that. So that postponed some of the discussions about this being an illegal water structure. And I think that a lot of people just stepped away from it after that. What has happened with that culvert that has been there is the culvert, if you look at the history of the water levels on Lake Zumbra, Mr. Whiskers and I have had many, many discussions about what should be appropriate types of controls put in place, ways to assure that we don't have the bounce that's been exhibited on that lake for over 50 years. And they are severe. They're much higher than most. We're seeing in some cases, a 10-foot rise in the water. That is because of the way we've controlled the outflow from the Lake Zumbra through the culvert back into the Sunny Bay, then onward down to. So there have been some things that are historic in terms of what's happened on this lake. And now as we're proceeding, in 2014, we ran into a lot of flooding. And at that point in time, I was one of the members that was leading what went on Lake Zumbra to try to identify what the problems were. We were not assisted in trying to discern exactly what the problems were and identify the problems effectively from the watershed district. We worked on our own diligently to try to find out what the problems were. And one of the problems was that over the years, the ditch that runs out of the Sunny Bay and goes down to carry the water down to the Auburn culvert that goes underneath County 11 into Auburn was filled with sediment that inhibited the water from going down the stream, and that the levels in that ditch were extreme. We did, after on our own initiating the hiring of a consulting firm to come in with take surveys, did identify that there were problems in what had happened with the maintenance of that ditch. The level was not enabling the water to flow down effectively down to Auburn. When we proposed doing that and asked for permissions from the park decided that they wanted to also verify what was going on, and they did their own surveying. Both of those surveys demonstrated that there was a specific problem there. We give the park credit for then working with us and initiating what went on to redig the ditch so that we were down to a level where water would flow. There is a place in the passage between the Sunny culvert and the one down in Auburn that was not addressed. That's the pond that is right there that's prior to going in through the Auburn tunnel. There was a heavy cost to that, and we wanted something that was more expedient. We wanted something that would prove that that was the cause of the issue at that point in time, which we did. So we, as in Lake Association, agreed that what should happen is that they should just redig the ditch. Then we would be able to look at the results and what was happening. I go back in history. I mentioned that I've been involved with what was going on, looking at the water levels for a long period of time and looking at what was going on with the culvert. I have a copy of a 1983 study that was done by E.A. Hickok, which at the time was the premier engineering firm for what was going on with water levels. And they did a study to say, is it effective to have the culvert at the size that it is today between the two parts of Zumbra, flowing from Zumbra to Sunny? Was that effective? Was that, could we increase culvert size that flows into Auburn? What impact would that have? Why were we getting all of these high water fluctuations? The fact is that with a single culvert underneath the bicycle path here we're talking about, that water would back up on the Sunny Bay because it wasn't getting out to get it to Auburn fast enough, would back up, and that would fill more water coming into the Zumbra part of the bay, push it back into it. And then once that water was in there, it couldn't get back out again until things dropped significantly on the Zumbra, on the Sunny Bay, going out. So that water level remained resident in the Zumbra part of the bay. Then if we had higher storms, after that had been aggregated and bumped up, then if we had a severe storm period where we were getting more water flow, what would happen is it couldn't get out, and therefore it would increase even further the flooding within Zumbra. That's happened persistently over the years. Now, we've had many heated debates about what to do about the water level and what should happen. Fact is that that's been the prevailing thing in the background going on. We recognize that the park has put lots of maintenance into what's going on with the culvert. One of the big peak problems that they have to live with are beavers. When the beavers get in and plug the culvert between the two, between our two bays, things even get worse again. It's aggravated more. And there is a cost for them to try to last couple of years, that's happened again. Beavers have been active, built their dam right and plugged up the whole culvert that went between the two bays underneath the bike. So there's a history here that needs to be taken into account. There's also law and legal aspects, riparian rights that are being restricted because there's not passage between the two parts of our lake. And it does interfere with fish passage and other aspects. These are the things that DNR put into the law and wrote that law for a reason, that you cannot build a crosswater structure. Maintaining it and trying to maintain the culverts and do all the rest of it just puts additional cost. We've been sitting there suffering this from year, and it's extremely frustrating. I know people are trying to work with their jobs and work with some other limitations. One of the most recent limitations was when we kept being postponed, and they kept telling us when the culvert gets changed out under 11 to go into Auburn, that will be the appropriate time to do a study, figure out how we're going to solve this problem. Because we're going to have the construction costs that are going to work into fixing. Well, unfortunately, that has not happened, and the reasons were being presented to us through Mr. Whiskers was that there's a restriction on what water level can happen on Auburn without a real study of what's with the different culverts and why we on the Zumbra Bay have to put up with this whole situation. Why that can't be shared downstream, why the box culvert is going to block so much water that Auburn is going to rise to an unreasonable level and is going to impact the 9 homes that are on Auburn. And that should take precedent over the 50 homes that we have on Zumbra. So I'm extremely frustrated with this. I've been heavily involved in it. My background is engineering, so I talked about the problem and taking a scientific approach and not just being emotional about it. We've got a history here of what's been happening that needs to be taken care of. And so when I responded immediately to the permit request, I basically said that this is a water lake body structure that's illegal under the DNR rules, and it would be our expectation that you would be following the rules that the DNR has set out and not trying to enable them to continue with what's happened in here. We recognize that we want to work with the park as to what can happen from a standpoint of their costs. Putting in these ditches and culverts and so forth makes it more difficult for them. It also we have to figure out how to handle what's going on with beavers in this whole thing. And that we need to somehow come back to this single lake concept of what's there and how to manage the natural ecology of what's going on. So my whole approach to this whole thing was that we need to sit down seriously right now before you agree to this permit change and postpone what's going on from a standpoint to the park. Yes, they're going to have some maintenance, but postpone what we're doing while we make a concerted effort to figure out what is really going to solve the problem, not let it persist the way that it is. I can go back through history and look at a wide variety of different things here. I mean, I just sitting here for a couple minutes ahead of time, scribbling notes to myself. about all the different aspects that are being impacted by what we have there and the need to do something about it. And, I go back to looking at that E.A. Hickok study in '83, and him telling us that we should be able to increase the size of the culvert going into Auburn and eliminate the culvert that goes underneath the bicycle path by putting in a bridge, which would enable passage back and forth on the lake, access to the full lake. And, we want to work with the park and try to figure out how to handle that. But there's a whole aspect here of, with the flooding and its frequency and the lack of maintenance to the ditch and other things that have gone on that we've lived with now I've witnessed it for 50 years. So, I implore you to help to take some action at this point about this. And let's spend a little bit of time to go back to the engineering of what's going on. Let's see if we can get to something that's going to fix the problem, not just be a replacement for the culvert and move it slightly over on that bicycle path. And I've even heard the DNR say that, oh, well, don't worry about that. That's a grandfathered situation. Well, it's not a grandfathered situation if you are making improvements and changes and everything else. The grandfathering clause does not stand up. There's nothing that I can see in Minnesota law that says that you can grandfather in a situation like this, prohibit people from getting to the other part, impact their riparian rights. In my filing, I said I was prepared to try to take this for a legal review if it's necessary. So, I've been sitting here watching this. I know the Palmatiers well, and my wife still works with Marilyn, Dale's wife. She was visiting with her the other day, and she asked how we were doing as a family. Claudia said, "Oh, Dick's down at the culvert again," and it just struck her. Oh my God, we haven't fixed that yet. Dale was working. I'm imploring you to take action, to take this into consideration, and to try to work with us. I'll be more than happy to work with you. There are a couple of others that have long extended work on the lake, what works and what doesn't. I think we have a sound relationship with the park overall. But again, you're guiding them in terms of what they can do. I don't think what you're telling them can be done is working to fix the problem.
Thank you, Mr. Hawley.
Questions from anybody?
We'll hold our questions till discussion.
Okay.
Is there anyone else who wished to speak to the board? May I have a motion to grant the permit? Oh, yes, please.
Thank you, President White and Board of Managers. I'm Brian Vlock. I'm the Senior Manager for Three Rivers Park District in the Water Resources Department. And I'd like to indicate that I appreciate Dick's comments. We've worked with Dick over the years on the channel excavation project that he's mentioned. We're also very sensitive to the water levels of Lake Zumbra. One of my concerns about an open channel situation, going back to an open channel, is the increase in water levels on Lake Zumbra. As I mentioned, we are sensitive to the 2014 increase in water levels during that year and the flooding and the some of the landscape damage that occurred and home damage that occurred from 2014 events. And I would hate to see that situation happen again. And I'm afraid that an open channel situation would create higher water levels for the homeowners. The Park District is concerned about the current culvert situation, which is failing and has exceeded its life expectancy. We don't want to get into an emergency situation where if the culvert does fail, that we get into operating in emergency mode. So we're trying to avoid that. We'd like to try and replace that culvert this year, is kind of our timeframe. To avoid any sort of heavy rains that might occur next spring while trying to deal with the situation and if we have a failed culvert. So we're trying to be proactive here. And yet at the same time, we've had conversations with the homeowners association about the potential for a flap gate. We are open to a feasibility analysis for that. We feel that replacing the culvert right now in an in-kind situation would still allow the opportunity to install a flap gate in the future if feasibility analysis kind of demonstrated that there wasn't much downstream impact with regards to natural resources in the park as well as infrastructure. So we are open to that idea, kind of wanted to express that. And the big thing for us is, again, trying to balance a situation where we're working with the homeowners, the watershed, and I kind of want to indicate or reemphasize that Park District is open and willing to do that. And but right now, our sense of urgency is to replace this culvert in kind and try and work with them, for looking at other opportunities and alternatives.
Thank you very much. May I have a motion to approve the permit? Moved by Manager Hijmati. Is there a second? Second by Manager Loftus. Discussion or questions?
Have they sent this off for a bid already, the Three Rivers? So you haven't. So we could work a little bit to answer this gentleman's questions, some concerns, or not? Then somebody could ask me a question about the DNR, the difference between their laws and our, or what they're saying we can do or can't do.
Who would like to answer that question? Mr. Smith, perhaps?
Madam President, I understood Mr. Hawley to refer to a DNR restriction as to placing structures between, across water body structures, what he referred to. I think it's also largely a matter of historical inquiry as to when the structure was installed, and I haven't reviewed the specifics of whether or not this is considered grandfathered and allowed. It's something we could look at, but I haven't looked at.
Manager Loftus?
Just a question. I've heard the application be referred to as in-kind by our staff and the park representative. So thank you for coming. And so I'm not sure if there's confusion or questions from the resident, Mr. Hawley. Thank you for sharing all your history. Do you not believe this to be in kind? So that's one question I have. And I don't know that we are in a position to answer, the question of the legality or illegality of the causeway. And I'm not an attorney, but typically when it's an existing condition or situation, and you're grandfathered to in-kind replacement or maintenance. So that's one question. I'm just curious. We're not. I know it's ideal to have a broader solution, but we are somewhat constrained by our role and an in-kind application looking. To be replaced and fitting our existing rules. And so I think I hear the complexity and the history, and it would be amazing to find a wider solution, but I also think we're pretty constrained in what we can accomplish as far as, for the request being taken action and guiding. I don't know if there's opportunity for that or not, but I also don't see a clear role for us on that, but I certainly empathize with what you're dealing with. So I guess it should be a pretty clear answer. Is it in kind or not? It seems to be represented as such. And then I guess I'm unclear as to how we could actually step in and really make an impact on this, given those constraints. Those would be my 2 comments.
Thank you. Mr. Hawley, I'll recognize you again. Would you come forward, please? Thank you.
I don't know if I was clear about one aspect. Zumbra and Sunny are a single lake. That way within the DNR
The report
records and
tells
so
us that
forth.
too,
I
yeah.
heard you say that.
We know that.
It's not a situation.
Understood. Yep.
Is listed as a single lake. We have worked even in reaffirming that, very important with what goes on with invasive species, what things they grant you based on area lake. Do consider it to be.
Ms. Manager Loftus asked the question, do you have any reason to believe it's not an in-kind replacement?
In-kind replacement?
The new culvert replacing the failing culvert?
The report that I referenced from E.A. Hickok looked at doing an straight replacement of the culvert versus doing an expanded replacement, or having no replacement at all. He did studies to say that we would not be encouraging flooding on the lake by removing the culvert. He would have liked to have increase the size of the culvert that goes into Auburn. Did not believe that would adversely impact what went on. Got some disagreeing discussions about the engineering that Whiskers and I had prior conversations about.
Thank you, Mr. Hawley. Anything else? It is. Yep. Anything else? Mr. Whiskers?
Do you want any feedback from me, given my history of involvement with Mr. Hawley, Three Rivers, the Zummer Ridge HOA? We covered quite a bit of this during the public hearing for County State Aid Highway 11 and the culvert replacement there, but if the board's feeling comfortable, I can hold my...
It meets our rules, and that's all that
Your
governs.
comments on it.
Okay,
We
go
have
ahead
time
then.
for it.
Well, I'll try to keep them brief. I would just echo what Brian said, and I think we've said this before on record. We sincerely appreciate the frustration and the concern that the homeowners of the Zummer Ridge Association have with regards to high water issues. I think we said at the last public hearing, you know, your home is your castle, and when you're dealing with persistent high water issues, we understand and recognize as a watershed why those are concerns. I think Mr. Hawley's got a deep historical knowledge of the system that, you know, I don't need to repeat, but I think he made it really clear. These are problems that have existed since the 1960s, which I think underpins some of the frustration, and they're due in part to infrastructure and land use changes that were made before a lot of today's regulations existed, including, you know, decisions that were made by the Highway Department to plumb County Road 11, and a farmer, and then Three Rivers Park District has inherited that infrastructure. So a lot of the way that the hydraulics work are obviously baked into the pie to some extent. I would just comment and reflect on, you know, Mr. Hawley noted his perspective, which I can appreciate, that he's received no assistance from the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District on this issue. We did work closely with Mr. Hawley, Scott Leonard, the Zummer Ridge Homeowners Association in 2016 to 17, after the big flood of record in 2014, spent considerable sum of money and a large amount of time working directly with the Department of Natural Resources, Carver County, the City of Victoria, Three Rivers Park District, Dick, Brian, myself, our engineering team spent many hours over many months and into a year together kind of exploring the issue. That report, which is in the packet, assessed the damages, not all of which are structural, modeled the system, and it evaluated a range of different solutions. It didn't prescribe solutions, but it evaluated what the options are in the system, and it drew off the Hickok study, which is appended to that 2016 study. So it took that into account. And it looked at the range of benefits and impacts, the benefits and consequences, benefits being to the Zumber Ridge on the water level issue and downstream impacts from those solutions. And the outputs of, and really what the changes in the system could be to infrastructure and land, none of which the district owns and has direct authority over. So we're really a convener and a broker of science and study around other agencies' infrastructure that we don't make all the decisions for. The outputs of that study included some of the improvements that Dick mentioned that he's grateful for. The dredging of the channel, the improved maintenance plan that Three Rivers has implemented sort of with a religious fervor. I know how often the maintenance staff are out there, and the communications framework that they have in place with the Zumber Ridge Homeowners Association. Some of the other things that the study outlined is that changes in the culvert at Highway 11, if that were to be expanded, which is the real outlet of this system, like Dick mentioned, Sunny and Zumbra are one public water basin. The control structure that regulates the water is really Highway 11, and that if that were to be expanded, it would increase the flood stage on Auburn Lake. The county's position at the time, I think, which Dick had reflected, was that they weren't contemplating replacement of that culvert, and if and when they ever did, they would think about it. I've covered, the Three Rivers Park District surveyed and did the ditch clean out, which was an offshoot of that planning. They improved the maintenance, coordination. Other things that were identified was a backflow preventer on the culvert that we're talking about tonight, which would prevent water from the Sunny system backwatering, which the city had agreed to advance at that time and actually had an engineering scope, I think from Bar Engineering, that they had put together. And this is in the report too, is our understanding from city staff that engineering study was pulled from the agenda at the request from homeowners. So there's a lot of sort of different perspectives on what the right solution should be. Again, any expansion of this culvert, given the current conditions, if you were to eliminate this land bridge, would worsen flooding for the Zumber Ridge Homeowners Association. It's pretty clearly documented and demonstrated through a whole range of hydraulic studies that the DNR has vetted, Three Rivers has replicated, the district's done independently. If this culvert were expanded without an expansion of Highway 11, which is the current condition because Highway 11's been replaced, flooding on Zumbra would worsen. And so that's sort of a key issue and difference of engineering opinion, I suppose, all the engineers that have modeled it have with Mr. Hawley, is that putting a bridge here is going to make things worse. So I think that's just a really key fact that I wanted to drive home on the record. County Road 11 was recently heard for reconstruction, and I think our rules guide for no exacerbation of flooding upstream and downstream. And so if you don't design for that, you'd need a variance. The county, who owns that infrastructure that was part of that entire flood study 2016, understands all the hydraulics, and they designed to those rules rather than, and I think this was a choice, rather than engaging that entire task force again, the DNR, Three Rivers, the landowners downstream on Auburn and the watershed, to change that from its current culvert dimensions to a larger opening. And
there was
those
no
aren't
time rush on that?
those aren't decisions that we made. And that permit has been heard, that project has been constructed, that is now the constraint. So now we're looking at this upstream culvert. Expanding capacity would worsen flooding for the Zumber Ridge HOA. I would also say, in contrast to Mr. Hawley's perspective, we have had conversations with leadership at the Homeowners Association, some of which are in the audience. And we had a meeting with them in Three Rivers Park District, as Abigail mentioned, and they've put in differing comments and differing perspectives, looking for Three Rivers to contemplate that backflow preventer. And so there just are different perspectives within the homeowners themselves on what the right solution is. So I think Three Rivers made it clear they're willing to entertain a feasibility analysis. Our engineers have looked at if the culverts are placed in kind, there could be a retrofit that improves high water condition to some extent. Three Rivers would have to evaluate the results of that and make a decision on whether or not it would be acceptable. And we've relayed that to the city and the city engineer, and they're thinking about whether or not they would pick that back up again. So sort of my historical retrospective perspective.
Thank you. Questions? Question? All right, then, I have a motion and a second. So we had a discussion. Is there anything else?
Before we vote, I was impressed with the presentation, and I have no idea what's right. I mean, there's so many different elements and of what are facts and what are hopes. So I'm gonna vote against it just in recognition of the presentation, you know, because I thought spent a lot of time and effort and energy on it. I want to recognize that.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Certainly just human empathy, I guess, really
Yeah.
prevails too here. Anything else? All those in favor of adopting the permit, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Thank you. Permit is approved. Thank you, Ms. Couture. And thank you, Mr. Hawley and Mr. Vladka for coming. Item 10.2 is next. Ms. Sanas presenting on permit 25106.
Evening, President White and Board of Managers. Tonight, I'll be briefing you on permit 25-106 for the reconstruction of the tennis courts at the Edina Community Center, proposed by the Edina Public School District and the associated exception request. The tennis court reconstruction is relatively small and will result in a reduction in hardcover. And for the proposed exception request, the school district is proposing to defer the construction of a stormwater facility to 3 to 4 years and have the city of Edina build a larger regional facility which addresses both water quality needs and flooding for the Concord neighborhood. I want to point out, as mentioned in the memo as well, that the school district inadvertently started work without a permit due to a misunderstanding about the sequence of approvals. There's also a letter in the packet from the school district expressing their interest in continuing to partner with the city and the district. Therefore, the approval being sought tonight is both for the exception request and for an after-the-fact permit. I'll start off the presentation with the project background, followed by a walkthrough of the district's rule analysis. I'll then outline the exception request, followed by time for questions or discussion. The applicant is proposing the project in the city of Edina, located in the Minnehaha Creek subwatershed, with the project location shown here in yellow. Zooming in a bit further, you can see the project site drains east via city storm sewers until it eventually outlets into the Minnehaha Creek. And a key piece of context on why the city initially flagged this site as one for increased partnership between the district, the city, and the school district is that the site lies in a part of the city that regularly experiences localized flooding. Here you can see areas inundated in the 100-year storm shown in yellow. In this event, a large part of the site is flooded, and modeling suggests that up to 29 homes in the Concord neighborhood area are impacted. The low-lying ballfield area in West 58th Street also regularly experiences flooding in even smaller storm events, and therefore the city has identified the school district site in their water resources management plan and capital improvement plan as one with the opportunity to decrease flood risk for the downstream neighborhood. One of the options that the city is interested in is having a regional stormwater facility located on the school district site in the low-lying area to provide flood storage for the neighborhood. Therefore, when the school district project arose in the same area, the city reached out to the district and the Edina Public School District to explore partnership opportunities. So then pivoting back to the school district project, You can see here the existing tennis courts, which the school district is proposing to reconstruct to improve functionality, as well as combine into one central area. Here you can see a little closer look of the existing configuration separated, and then the proposed configuration, which also results in a net decrease in hardcover. Here a little bit of project background. I'll now pivot to the district rule analysis for the project. Because the project disturbs more than 5,000 square feet of land, the erosion control rule is applicable. The applicant's erosion control plan proposes a construction entrance at the northwest side of the site near the existing parking lot, with perimeter control down gradient of the entire project area. Staff has reviewed the applicant's erosion control plan and found that it to be compliant with all rule requirements. Because the project is reconstructing impervious surface, the stormwater management rule is triggered as well. Due to the extent of hardcover reconstruction, the project is required to treat the new and reconstructed impervious surface for both volume and rate control. Because the project decreases hardcover, runoff rates leaving the sites are decreasing and rate control is met. And then through the partnership, the city is proposing to assume responsibility of building stormwater management facilities on behalf of the school district in the form of a future regional facility. However, because the city facility won't be built until 2028, it doesn't meet district rules, which require that the facilities be built within 2 years of impervious surface construction, which in this case would be summer of 2027. During the public notice period, one comment was received by phone. The commenter expressed that he is supportive of the project as he also experiences the localized flooding that the city's pointed out. He also noted that one of the existing outfalls on the site has become washed out with erosion and finds that it is unsafe. This comment was then relayed to the project team and to the city, who's planning on repairing the erosion and replacing the casting on the outfall to alleviate the issue in the near future. Now that I've gone over the district rule analysis, I'll discuss the applicant's exception request in more detail. When the school district project first approached the district about permitting the tennis court project, they were proposing to implement a site-specific best management practice, or BMP, to treat just the required runoff from the tennis court project. This BMP was going to be an underground basin generally under the area shown in orange where the tennis courts are located. However, the city would create the regional facility in this general area of the ball fields. The project is required to provide 0.59 pounds of phosphorus load reduction per year. But because the project is proposing to defer treatment by 3 to 4 years, in dialogue with the city, we've set the obligation higher than the 0.59 pounds and instead at 0.86 pounds. Through this regional treatment approach, the public then gets a regional facility that addresses localized flooding and has set minimum load requirements of 0.86 pounds per year. The reason for the switch from the 0.59 to 0.86 requirement is that this way, after 10 years, the load reduction lost through deferment is actually reclaimed, and then the project starts accumulating additional public benefit thereafter. If for some reason the city is not able to build the regional facility, they will be required to choose an alternative location that can still provide treatment requirements and drain to the same receiving water body, the Minnehaha Creek. And when considering deferred treatment, it's also important to understand that the hardcover on-site amount is decreasing, so therefore the rates, volume, and phosphorus loading will be decreasing because of the project, and there won't be any risk in the interim. Finally, while it's outside of the exception request, the partnership also allowed for both the city and the school district to save on project costs. The tennis court project requires a lot of imported fill, and the city project would need to export a lot of fill from the excavation. So this way, both entities were able to save on costs by using city excavated material for the tennis court project. And the agreement is currently being drafted in coordination with the school district and City of Edina. A condition of approval tonight would be the finalization and execution of the agreement. The draft agreement is attached in the packet, but I'll outline a few of the key terms here again. The principal terms are that they will be deferring the treatment of the 0.59 pounds, and the city will be building a facility which treats 0.86 pounds or more by 2029. And again, if it turns out that the location on the school district site is not feasible, the city will need to find an alternative location for treatment. Once complete, we would review an as-built survey to ensure the facility was built according to the required standards, and then the city would be required to maintain the facility to district standard maintenance terms as well. Any excess capacity outside of what is required for the tennis court project would then also be available for the city or school district to treat future projects as well. And if the board decides to approve this permit and exception request tonight, the next steps would be finalizing and executing the cooperative agreement with non-substantive edits on the advice of legal counsel. Then the city would conduct feasibility in 2026 and design in 2027, with us being involved to ensure that the standards are being met. The city would then plan on moving into construction in 2028, with us giving them the deadline of this facility being constructed by the end of 2029. So to summarize what I've presented tonight, the Edina Public School District proposes the reconstruction of the tennis courts located at the Edina Community Center site, triggering the district's erosion control and stormwater management rule, for which it seeks an exception. Staff and the district engineer have reviewed the application and finds that it meets all rule requirements except for Section 10A of the stormwater management rule, and therefore recommend approval. Thank you, President White and Board of Managers, for listening to this briefing on Permit 25-106 and the associated exception request. If you or the board have any questions, I'm happy to address them now.
Thank you. Is there anybody here who wished to speak to this permit? Applicant or otherwise? Okay, seeing no hands. Is there a motion to approve the permit? Thank you, Manager Miller. Is there a second? Manager Hejmati seconds.
Is there a opportunity for storage in addition to treatment?
Yes, so the, good question, Manager Miller. The proposed facility from the City of Edina would be a regional facility mainly for flood storage. So it's in their capital improvement plan, identified in this location as a storage opportunity. However, we wanted to make sure that the facility would still have the required load reduction that strict rule requirements would.
Do I have a conflict? My granddaughter plays in the tennis team.
Unless she gets paid, I don't think. I made that up. That's totally not true. I'm curious about why it's an after the fact. What work has been done?
Yes, so good question, President White. They started construction in June, so last time staff was out on site was earlier this week. They've done the subgrade, and I think they're beginning to do some of the paving, so that's kind of how far the work has been done. It was a misunderstanding kind of on the sequence of approvals. I understand that the school district is also limited for the timing of the project, as tennis starts in the fall as well, so I think that it was a misunderstanding, and they're trying to get things done before the school year starts as well.
Okay. So one of the photos you showed looked like there was some raw dirt there. Does that indicate construction, or is
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
This is a photo from earlier this week, so you can see this is the tennis courts that are under construction. I believe that's the first layer of paving, kind of just above the subgrade.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
And then I have maybe I'll ask you, Mr. Whisker, just a generic question is, how many after-the-fact permits do we see in a year? And if that after-the-fact meets the rules, is that still remain an administrative decision?
That's a good question that I don't have the immediate answer to. I would say, President White, most of the after-the-fact permits that we find are usually single-family home builders that have proceeded to construct a single-family home and tear down rebuild situation simply without pulling a permit. We don't get many like this of projects of this scale, especially when public partners are involved. In those instances, we're treating it as staff enforcement underneath our enforcement policies and graduated enforcement. So typically with a single-family home, you're dealing with things like sediment and erosion control for construction. So we're making sure the site has a sediment and erosion control plan and is being brought into compliance. And then the sort of the next level of regulatory issues that we deal with single-family homes is often wetland protection and buffers and setbacks, and we're making sure that they're compliant with those. If they're not in compliance, can't be brought into compliance, unwilling to be brought into compliance, then those are things that at a certain point would be escalated up to the Board of Managers.
Thank you.
Another-
Mr. Miller?
You showed the flood potential. What percent of that impacted areas would be covered by the additional storage capacity?
Yeah, good question, Manager Miller. The city, my understanding is this project and the flood storage at the Southview Middle Edina Community Center site is one of a multitude of options. So they're still exploring options for flood reduction on the site, but this one seemed to be one that was feasible, especially with the school district project coming in. So I don't have a specific answer of how much impact it would, since the city's still kind of weighing their options there.
When they're redoing all the sewers, storm sewers, they've been doing treatment facilities all over. Does many of them have storage capacity?
That's a good question. I am not sure. I'll defer to.
Manager Miller, yeah, I think the city of Edina's got, like you said, a practice when they're doing road reconstruction. Whether they're bringing a project into compliance with stormwater management through watershed rules or not, even if it's not required, they're integrating what you call inline treatment and underground treatment into the project. That's sort of their best practice, and I think you live near one. But the big
Well, I got a facility in front of my house, and they store it in my backyard.
Yeah.
You know.
And so a lot of grit chambers and underground systems, but none of those are storing floodwaters.
Okay.
They're not a flood attenuation project. They're treating for water quality. This is a project that is explicitly surface storage to get that water in an area that can be ponded on other public land, and then have that offset and trade any increases that they might propose in conveyance to the actual pipe system.
So all the facilities they built in Country Club are treatment, not.
Treatment, not storage.
All right.
Quick question. It's 2 years away, basically. So if there's any changes as either the school district or the city makes, do they have to come back to us again, or is this permit good for life of whatever they want to do?
Yeah, so good question, Manager Maxwell. The term sheet will kind of outline the different steps along the way as the city begins to move into feasibility and design. We'll be a partner at the table reviewing design documents to make sure that they conform to both the treatment requirements for this permit, as well as the overall terms and rule requirements as part of the maintenance, or excuse me, as part of the agreement in general. So if there's any substantive changes outside of the agreement, I believe then that would need to be escalated. But at this point, the agreement outlines kind of key points of contact between us and the city to ensure that everything is aligned with the permit.
A lot can happen in 2 years.
Mr. Whisker?
To answer Manager Maxwell's question, a bit more definition, I mean, we will keep this in front of the board so that as the project progresses, just like we did with the Morningside project, which was also a City of Edina, Minneapolis, and Park Board partnership, as that feasibility work is being undertaken, we'll be providing key updates on how the project is progressing. So that if there are challenges and they're pivoting back to a site-specific and on-site BMP, that you're being brought along in that process. And then, as Veronica mentioned, if there's substantive changes that depart from the agreement or depart from the permit, that would actually require board approval, and we'd be back in front of you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Those in favor? Oh, Manager Loftus?
Just quickly, I'm risk adverse, so the kind of delayed benefit concept is not a favorite of mine. However, I think this is unique, so I support it, but I just want it to be known that I don't think this is precedent setting. I know we've done it on some private properties, but I think there's a risk of, or I'm not interested in chasing down people in Ford to implement delayed benefits. I think that's a staff burden, it's a legal burden, it's a complexity that generally isn't interesting to me. But this is unique in a lot of ways, noted in your staff report. And this is a proven partner and an opportunity to save tax dollars for a few different public agencies. So I'm going to support it, but I just would like it. I'm just stating it that I do not believe it to be precedent setting nor a common instrument for being creative or finding solutions for issues. I think it's complex. Trails with risk.
Yeah, thank you,
In
Manager.
this case, Edina is a proven partner and we're signing an agreement, but not precedent setting in my opinion.
Yes, Manager Loftus, I appreciate the comments, and I think there's definitely multiple things we look into for deferred treatment as well. For this, it was having public partner, as you mentioned, was a big one, as well as the fact that since they are decreasing hardcover in the interim, there's lower rates, lower volume, less load reduction as well, and the opportunity for greater treatment as well. So I definitely agree with the comments where there can be some risk there, and we wanted to definitely weigh our options and kind of look in the exception analysis and analyze it accordingly.
Thank you. Anything else? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Ms. Sanas.
Thank you.
Item 11.1, Mr. Sherman presenting Resolution 25040.
It's distracting for tennis players to see those stripes. Yeah. Goodness.
You're way ahead of the
Looking
times.
at the
All right.
Good evening. I'm guilty of striping a tennis court with pickleball
Visual
tape, so
clutter.
apologies. President White, Board of Managers, I'm here this evening with a very brief presentation on the adoption of the 2026 Capital Improvement Plan, sort of wrapping up that process that we started back in May. So as many of you will remember from last year, in previous years, the Capital Improvement Plan is a statutorily required component of our water resources plan. But every year, we revise and redistribute that 10-year CIP with all of our projects to our member cities and counties for a 30-day review period, review and comment period. And the purpose of this annual process of putting it out for review, it really allows us to adjust our CIP annually based on new feasibility analyses that we've conducted, any new project opportunities that have been identified through coordination through our Land and Water Partnership Program, shifts in priorities that come up over the course of a year or multiple years, and reassessing staff and financial capacity. So as projects are kind of continually in this development phase, we can also then on an annual basis provide our partners with a greater level of specificity on where each project is actually at in the process. And finally, it's sort of as a communication tool, it reminds our member communities of our implementation approach and sort of our willingness and desire to coordinate and align our plans with their comprehensive and strategic plans as well. So every year when we distribute the 10-year table, we accompany that with a cover letter that kind of reinforces our planning process and promotes, again, that early coordination that we're always looking for. We've also, for several years, been including some additional tools to accompany it. We've referred to it as our multi-year CIP. And this really provides an additional degree of clarity around some of the near-term initiatives. It includes kind of our things such as time, staff allocation, and then all the resources that we think are necessary to carry out each of those projects. So really a tool for the board and the public to understand what it takes to carry a project through sort of the multi-year planning, feasibility planning and design stages through construction. It also creates a framework that allows us kind of, by putting all those projects together in one place, to better forecast
our capital budget needs over multiple years and what our fundraising needs are over that period of time. And again, we're always looking to, if we get constructive feedback on these tools from our outside partners, whether or not the tables and accompanying materials are helpful in them understanding, kind of what are our priority initiatives, what's in active planning phase, and allowing them to know when they should really be plugging in. So sort of the statutorily required component is this 10-year table. Every project that we've identified is listed in this table, and we've been sorting it by sub-watershed, sort of as a helpful organizational way of displaying this data for our communities. We've taken the additional step of breaking that down into more of a detailed 5-year look. And so these are projects, this is kind of give the board and again, member communities an understanding of the project life cycle. So rather than the static or somewhat static 10-year table that just simply lists a project with costs, this shows where each project is, what phase we're at, and tries to allocate dollars to each of those phases. So understanding the cost to bring a project through planning versus design versus construction versus a warranty phase. And then since it's a lot of numbers and spreadsheets, we've also been, for projects that are in active planning and design, we've been accompanying the tables with more of a project one-pager. Actually a two-pager if you include the map. So we've this really distills down some of the most salient information. What does it cost to construct, to design and plan? Pairs it with a bit of a narrative for each project so that people understand the context in which it fits within our overall plan and the sub-watershed, and provide sort of that visual look with the map on where that project is taking place within the watershed. So we've tried to keep the CIP process on a fairly similar timeline for the past several years, really to align with adoption of the overall budget and levy. So we began the process back in May, along with development of the budget. And then that was reviewed with the board at both the May OPC and June OPC meetings. At its June 26th meeting, the Board of Managers authorized its release for the 30-day comment period, which began on July 1st, and we accepted comments through the end of July. And now we're here in August adopting the CIP now that we've received the comments that we're going to, and that will be in time for final budget and levy hearing, which will be held on the 28th of this month. So this year we just received 2 comments from our partners, City of Edina and City of St. Louis Park. I'll note right up front that both of these comments are considered procedural in nature, and so are not included as formal comments, but we bring those comments to the board just so you have a full understanding of what our partners are thinking as they review our CIP every year. From Edina, we received a request just to be involved in any progress on the Meadowbrook Golf Course ecological restoration and greenway expansion, noting just that they're a project partner in that area, and we have that project listed on the CIP, and they would like to be part of any progress that we can make on that. And St. Louis Park simply was seeking some clarification on their cost share responsibility for the Cedar Trail Connection project. So more of a clerical misunderstanding that we corrected through this process. So barring any questions or comments from the board, we'd be seeking to adopt the 2026 Capital Improvement Plan with Resolution 25-040 this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Sherman. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move approval.
Manager Hejmati, Would you second, Manager Miller?
Yes.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Sherman? Well, as you outlined, we've had a number of opportunities to see this as it comes through. No questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 11.2, Resolution 25041, Mr. McDermott Spees.
Hello, President White, Board of Managers. I'm here tonight to seek authorization to contract with Stantec to design for design, bid support, and construction oversight for maintenance of Twin Lakes Pond. For the board tonight, I will cover a background on pond maintenance, an overview of the scope of work, next steps, and provide a recommendation. The Minnehaha Creek Watershed District is responsible to inspect and maintain 26 stormwater ponds through ownership or cooperative agreements. One of these responsibilities is periodic dredging of accumulated sediment. MPCA best management practices recommend that dredging occur when pond volume is reduced by 50% of its original design volume. In an effort to gain better understanding of our pond inventory and long-term maintenance needs, the stormwater pond data analysis was done in 2023. This study looked at historical survey data and dredging data to determine average sedimentation rates for MCWD's 26 stormwater ponds. Using these rates, a 20-year schedule for dredging maintenance was offered, identifying Twin Lakes Park Pond and Nokomis Amelia Pond as the first ponds in need of maintenance in the winter of 2023-2024. Stantec was contracted for the design and engineering, and Minnesota Dirt Works for the construction. The winter of 2023-2024 was unseasonably warm, leading to work being delayed. Following these delays, an additional permitting hurdle was encountered with the presence of Blandings turtles at the Amelia Pond. The combination of these factors led to the termination of the construction contract in November of 2024. Staff has requested from Stantec a scope of work, scope of services to separate the work at Twin Lakes Pond and Nokomis Amelia Pond. Establishing a separate contract at Twin Lakes Pond would allow staff to work, to move dredging work forward while staff work to find solutions and alternatives for completing work at Amelia. Twin Lakes continues to be a priority for dredging, as it is estimated to be currently at about 56% full. The scope of work, my apologies. Sorry about that. The scope of work is broken into 3 tasks. Task 1 is to complete the project, provide completed project plans consisting primarily of separating out the plan sheets for Twin Lakes and Amelia, producing construction documents and materials for permitting. Task 2, which is a separation of specifications, the creation of a construction manual, and support for the solicitation of construction bids. Task 3 is for Stantec to lead construction administration and observation. Staff have reviewed the scope and found it to meet the needs of the project. The cost of $25,860 has been compared to similar work by other firms, and as well as Stantec's previous work for the district, and has found to be comparable. Next steps for this project would be to return to the board in September to seek approval to solicit bids. In October, we would obtain and review bids and provide an award recommendation. And in November of this year and February of next year, to
to finalize contracting and oversee construction at Twin Lakes Pond. With this, staff recommends the approval of Resolution 25-041 to authorize the execution of a contract with Stantec for the design, bid support, and construction oversight for maintenance of Twin Lakes Pond. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move approval.
I'll take a motion from Manager Miller, a second from Manager Hijmati. Questions? Manager Olson?
Do you have a feel for what the real cost is going to be, apart from this administrative management portion?
The current budget, I believe, is budgeted for 340 based on kind of the work conducted last time. Part of the scope of work from Stantec will be to provide an updated engineer's estimate to really refine those costs. Part of why we've broken it out into several steps bringing you here.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for.
How many yards of material would be taken out?
In 2023, it was estimated that 3,030 yards would be removal. Based on the accumulation rates in the pond study, there will be an additional 767 cubic yards of material to remove.
Is most of that street debris from salting and sanding and all that?
The final source, I'm not quite sure. I don't think we have a study for that, but the Twin Lakes Pond drainage area is quite large. It's about a little over 1,300 acres. So a lot of sediment comes into that pond from street materials and things like that.
I have a question for our engineer. When we talk about hard surfaces like we did with the tennis courts, do you grade a difference in terms of loading when it comes to a roof and a tennis court versus a road? Or do you treat it all as hard surface because dirt comes from everything?
Don't necessarily.
Because when I look at these ponds, I'm thinking roadway for the most part, everything coming down storm sewers, so. But I know that a lot of that's coming from rows and patios and things like that. Okay, thanks.
Anything else?
1,300 acres, does that include the west end then?
West End Manager Miller drains to Brownie Lake.
Okay.
So it's in this same essential subwatershed, but just a jog to the north. And so this goes straight west all the way out to Lamplighter and that Lifetime project that we did.
Okay.
So it's just south of the freeway.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, sir. Oh, I have a question. There's an abbreviation I didn't know in there, ERUV. I couldn't find that.
That's in Aruv. That's actually it's a designated area for one of the Jewish synagogues in the area that provides it as a private space to allow different accommodations for coming to Sabbath.
Thank you. Next up, we have 11.3, Mr. Heyman presenting resolution, I'm sorry, two resolutions.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Board Managers. We are before you this evening to present the East Auburn Wetland Restoration Project. There are two recommended actions this evening. The award of the construction contract for the restoration effort itself, and then an amendment to the mower design contract for construction administration services. I do want to note that Rachel Baker couldn't be with us this evening, but the effort to get the project to this point and the materials and presentation before you are all due to her diligent work. I just get the opportunity to present it to you. So to quickly orient the board to the location of the restoration effort, I think you're all quite familiar with the East Auburn Wetland Restoration by this point, but it is occurring in Cell 1 between Wasserman Lake and East Auburn Lake. You can see the pinch point here where the peninsula is and the boardwalk extends across, and all of this drains north to East Auburn Lake. The project design consists of two key elements. It's a weir structure, which you'll see in that narrowest point of the wetland system, and then the boardwalk reconstruction just to the north of that. The project itself will create about a 6 to 12 inch permanent pool of water within the wetland. It's a very shallow wetland in and of itself, so the emergent vegetation will still exist. You won't really know that blue permanent pool. You won't see it in the sense of a shallow marsh or deep water marsh, but it all is contained within the wetland boundary itself. And essentially, we're restoring the degraded wetland by re-engineering the hydrology that existed prior to the ditch being placed through the wetland from Wasserman to East Auburn Lake. That weir is directly below the boardwalk, but not within proximity where you could access it. You might see it during low vegetation times, but otherwise will largely be invisible to folks who are on the boardwalk. And lastly, all access for construction is going to make its way up the existing trail into the site. So the bid process itself began on July 7th. We hosted an optional pre-bid meeting on July 22nd and only had a couple of attendees, so we're curious to see what was going to happen from a bid response standpoint, and then did open bids on July 31st, and we're excited to see the response that we did get with 8 contractors all submitting bids. There was a wide range in those total bid costs, but it was a relatively even distribution above and below the engineer's opinion of probable cost, which was right around $610,000. We did structure the bid as a base bid with that bid alternate for reconstruction of the boardwalk. That really was to allow flexibility and assurance for the watershed district that it could move its project forward if boardwalk bids came in higher than the city had anticipated and they didn't want to proceed with construction of that element itself. So digging into the numbers just a bit further for context, Pember was the low responsive and responsible bidder and has been suggested in the memo to you from our engineers at Moore, as well as staff review. The board may recall that Pember was the boardwalk contractor for the Wasserman Lake Preserve. And so they're very familiar with both the location of the system and the design. And so I think the reconstruction is essentially a mirrored design of that, and they probably felt very comfortable coming back out and building that similar system. So when we do compare the Pember bid to the engineer's opinion of probable cost, you can see that the bid is quite favorable, again, likely due to their familiarity with the site and that system. We did, in the opinion of probable cost, predict that the weir would be more expensive than the boardwalk component. Most bids were actually the inverse of that, with the exception of 2 bids. The weir was actually the less expensive element, and the boardwalk came in over that predicted cost. But when you look at the ranges, you sort of see quite a bit of variability. And if you looked at the bid tab, you'll see some of that is in very specific areas within the bids themselves. Most of the project components seem pretty consistent. It's a lot of the other elements that you'll see within their bid tabulation. The project agreement with Victoria required written concurrence from the city manager that the bid alternate was acceptable and the city wishes to pursue that. We did provide all of the information to the city immediately following the bid opening and did receive that confirmation from the city manager that they would like to advance the ad alternate. Ultimately, we'll add about $10,000 a year in their 5-year payment structure. They're paying us 20% upon project completion, with the 4 remaining payments equal over those next 4 years. Regarding the second resolution before you this evening, we are recommending an amendment to the Moore design scope for construction administration. The scope of work is provided in your packet, and it includes all elements for administration, staking, site observation, all of the inspection logs, and then final as-built survey. And that is for both Moore Engineering, their field engineer, and to have Hire out on site. Hire was the structural engineer for both the weir and the boardwalk helical components. We did develop that scope prior to bid opening, and so it does apply a pretty conservative 4 to 6 week construction window to ensure that the longest amount of construction time would likely be covered by our administrative contract. I will say, though, given the bids and what we've seen with Pember's bid, it's likely going to be a much shorter construction window. based on the subs and how it appears that they're structuring that. We'll know more once we actually have the pre-construction meeting, but I think they're planning to have a very efficient process out there, and so would likely require us to be on site much less than we had originally predicted. A couple of final notes I did want to point out. You may note that some of the bid tasks included in the pre-construction task mention bid tasks, and that was because there was a slight design overage that occurred when we were trying to facilitate our modeling and permit process internally. We aimed with the project team to recoup that during the bid process, hoping that given the relative nature of the project, there wasn't going to be a lot of questions or addendums required. That didn't end up being the case. We actually had a lot of interest in the site, a lot of questions on electronic bid bonds, and a variety of questions on how we were e-bidding the project. And so we did want to note that there was a minor task adjustment in this in the construction administration contract. It's well within the administrative approval or administrator's authority, but we did want more to be transparent on that and bring that to the board and just call that out this evening. So if there are questions on that. I do also want to note that we do intend to modify our construction administration contracting process following the current suite of projects that are in design. And so rather than asking for anticipated costs during the design contract effort, we want to scope and contract those construction administrative services during the design scope process. So it's a more efficient contracting method, and it has the design team really sharpening their pencil early on rather than having to wait. We've done it both ways in the past. Some projects do change substantially during design. A Minnehaha Preserve, for instance, would be one of them where a large trail boardwalk system was added. But that's something that would make more sense to amend a contract for construction services at that time versus waiting until you've designed the project, then asking the engineer, who is essentially necessary for construction administration, to provide you a scope of work. So I just wanted to flag that for the board. We only have a few more projects coming through. You'll see a construction administration contract at the time of a bid award, and then you'll likely be seeing that as part of our original design scope. And so following board consideration this evening, should the board award the contract to Pember, we will initiate construction contracting prior to the winter construction season. We would anticipate, like I said, 4 to 6 weeks of construction, although I think we identify about a 30-day actual window, assuming we get frozen conditions on the site. And with that, I would ask the board to consider resolutions 25042 and 25043 to advance the East Auburn Wetland Restoration Project.
Thank you, Mr. Heeman. Is there a motion to adopt
So moved.
042? Manager Olson moves. And a second by Manager Maxwell. Questions?
I could not help but observe a blinding amount of parallels here. Earlier this evening, we talked about two bodies of water that had a pinch point. And in that case, we were going to put a culvert under. And it was feeding directly into East Auburn. Now we're talking about a pinch point where the land is coming together and we're feeding water into Lake East Auburn. And here we're using a bridge and a weir. And it works. And we're holding water back and we're letting water through and we're managing that. And I'm comfortable with the design and the recommendations, but I'm fascinated at the idea that possibly very similar situations have two radically different designs, and I would be curious to see how both work over a period of time in the future. So.
Yeah, Manager Olson, that's a good point. I would say they're similar in some regards, quite different in others, in the sense that here we have a relatively shallow wetland system with a ditch running through it versus a large lake system that's been bisected by a culvert and road. So in terms of the volume of water, I think we're dealing with is much different. And then actually in this system, that was one of the reasons why we had the design overage, is the weir itself was dependent upon the height, creating bounce in downstream wetland systems, not upstream. which seems counterintuitive when you're placing a weir within the wetland itself. So it required us to do a variety of different modeling efforts and height and notch configurations, if you'll recall, the notch to a single notch to a V notch. But yeah, it's a fascinating exercise in hydrology.
Manager Miller?
After our boardwalk experience, I'm not too impressed with the low bid. You know, and especially the highest bid was so extremely high. They didn't want the work. Is that, why did they put in a bid then if they don't want the work? I don't understand that. The second thing is, have we had experience before with this?
Yep.
Okay, and
Yeah. Yeah, Manager Miller, managers Pember Companies is the contractor who built the Wasserman Lake Preserve Boardwalk.
okay,
Fantastic system. They're definitely, boardwalk construction is right in their wheelhouse. So I think that was definitely a favorable bid. And then it appears, based on the bid itself, that the sub that they're bringing in to assist with the weir is also the sub that they'll be using for the helical piers, the large steel sub-consultants. So I think it's a very favorable bid and also a very reputable contractor.
Didn't Pember bid on the boardwalk as well?
Pember bid on the Preserve Boardwalk during the last reconstruction, and if I remember right, they missed the bid by like $22,000 from being low bid. So
what,
on a $1.8 million.
who's the construction supervisor?
I'm sorry, for Pember?
Yeah,
Brent Pember himself is.
no, but I'm talking about, who are we hiring to review?
Oh, More Engineering will be our construction
Okay.
administration
Now, what
and hiring.
responsibility do they have? Besides, you know, everything's going good, don't worry about it. You know, how do we hold them accountable?
Yeah, Manager Miller managers, this has been something we've been talking about quite a bit, given the current situation that we've been dealing with at the Minnehaha Preserve. More and Higher Engineering, their main tasks associated with construction administration is obviously to review submittals, to ensure that what is being placed on site is what meets plans and specifications, to work through any construction staking, as-built surveys, those components. When it relates to being in the field, they're really there to observe the contractor's means and methods and ensure that they're not doing something that isn't allowed on the site, but they're not there to dictate or oversee how the contractor decides it wants to build a structure itself. So they're there to log and ensure that, people are on site, that they're moving around the site efficiently, that they're using staging areas and access areas appropriately, that erosion and sediment control is in place, all of the contract components, but not how the contractor is actually completing its work.
Well, I don't want to add to your gray hair from your experience, but who do we hold, who's supervising to make sure they put the nails in the right place and have the right brackets and all those other things that we're becoming experts on?
Manager Miller managers, that's the responsibility of the contractor. Now, if we're the engineer or staff were to see something that's out of the ordinary, they can certainly raise that. The components themselves that are being installed all have to be submitted and approved in advance. Whether the contractor then installs them to the appropriate depths or with the correct nailing schedule is an issue for the contractor themselves and not the engineer.
But it's built to our specifications.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
but we won't know that until something falls apart. We've learned our lesson. Who is gonna make sure that they build it exactly the way,
If you were to build a house, would you send someone around with the person nailing every nail, or how would you do it beyond having a construction supervisor and materials inspections? I don't know how you would, and then a bond and an insurance. I don't know how else you could possibly.
building codes, and the building inspector do that, make sure that they're all, they're using 2x4s when
Yeah,
it's called for
well, they do
2x4.
that at inspection points. They don't
Yeah.
follow them every step of the way.
Well,
I wish there was a way to guarantee it, but there are no guarantees, I guess, sadly. Or unless you're aware of some way to accomplish that.
have somebody out there supervising every day, whether
Yeah,
it be a
and-
staff person or a contractor.
Manager Miller and Managers Chair White, the challenge there, and Lewis can probably speak to this more, and we've had this conversation at length with Chuck Holtman, our legal counsel, is at some point you're walking a fine line between oversight and overseeing a contractor and dictating how they do the work versus observing how they're doing the work and ensuring they're meeting the specifications, which is this central argument that we have right now as it relates to the preserve and who said what at what time and was leading efforts out there. Similarly, there wasn't a site inspector on site because they hadn't been notified of the progress, when that challenge, or I think we would have run into those code issues immediately. So I think the system is set up to succeed when you actually have in place the right construction administration, the right contractor, the right city enforcement and city inspection. But sometimes there's gaps.
Not completely applicable, but, when you build a road, you test your material. Already require as-built surveys on completion before anything's accepted. You make sure it's built how they said it was going to be built, and then your inspector has periodic inspections. So, we could require some sort of built. If we don't think the building inspectors often enough. Result survey. I don't know.
Yeah, Manager Loftus, that is part of Moore's.
Is it too? Okay.
Part of Moore's construction or administration contract is to provide us with the as-built survey as well. Particularly important with the Weir,
Right. 'Cause that
making
has
sure
a
our
specific
elevations.
elevation.
Correct.
But I'm talking about like nail holes.
Mhm.
There's no as-built survey for
Right.
nail holes. I don't know how you
Well,
verify that.
We saw a demonstration here that failed right in
No,
front of
I
us.
know, but I'm just trying to, practical ways of
consistent.
verifying the work. That's not something typically verified. Like a road or a weir, you want to know it got built to the right height.
Madam President, without engaging in too much discussion of other projects, I think there is a reasonable expectation that can be placed on the engineering firm that's doing construction oversight to catch when work is not conforming to the specifications. And to be, if they're on site, that they're observing that, and if they do observe it, that they report it back. And so I don't think we're operating, the construction oversight takes great care not to dictate means and methods to the contractor, but they're also to be aware if specifications are being followed or not. So in other cases, they have not been.
All right, I'm
And
sorry.
that doesn't relieve the oversight engineer of the obligation.
Thank you. And we like the boardwalks.
We love the boardwalk at Washington.
Anything else before we vote? Manager Hajmati?
Typically,
Yeah. Manager Hajmati, President White Managers, I would say there's a few factors, I think, based on this bid process itself. The first being we were the first project out for winter work, which was our goal. And we did hear that from multiple contractors. We've also heard that through the County Road 6 bid process, which will be back in front of you in 2 weeks for a bid award, that our winter work was the first to hit the streets. So we were seeing more contractors willing to throw a bid at it. So, 8 is a lot in terms of bids on our projects. Usually we'll see 4 or 5. Yep. And then to Manager Miller's point, a couple of them, I think, were throwing numbers at it in, if no one else bids, then I think we'll consider the project. Otherwise, it wasn't something they were going to chase. And without getting into the specifics of the bid tabulation, you can see that typically in a few of the very specific numbers that you would have received in your via email, which would be mobilization is typically the first number you can look at and see if someone was serious about the bid or not. And when that number's very high, it's typically a firm that's interested in potentially doing the project if no one else bids, and that was the case for 2 or 3 of the bids. So I think we had 4 very competitive bids, all below the opinion of probable cost, and then the next 2 were within 10 to 20,000 of the OPC. So there were certainly 6 of the 8 bids that I think were all competitive, just different levels of understanding of the site and what they thought it would take for them to deliver the weir versus the boardwalk component.
They're also the same group 1 mile away that did our other boardwalk. So it's like they know how to drive there, and they know the familiarity of what we expect and what the city got last time. They've got a head start.
Are you ready to vote? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much, Mr. Heyman. Now, the second resolution is 25043 regarding the Moore design contract. Is there a motion to adopt? Manager Maxwell, is there a second? Manager Hejmati, questions for Mr. Heyman? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
They're the ones doing that. I was going to say, that's the group that's going to be keeping an eye on it.
Oh, yeah.
So are there any issues, inquiries, or ideas that board members would like to flag this evening for further review?
No, I'm worn out.
Okay, next week maybe. Mr. Whisker, could we have your report?
Certainly. President White, managers, we'll start where we usually do at the beginning with water levels. Water levels across the district have continued to moderate after some of the peak in the latter part of June after some big rainstorm events. Lake Minnetonka, I think in particular, hit 929.8, so very close to spillway. Late June, right now sits just below ordinary high water at 929.36. Minnehaha Creek is at a modest 100 cubic feet per second, and the dam's discharging at 75. We are expecting somewhere between 1 and 1.25 inch of rain this weekend. That could bring the lake up about 1/10 of a foot, closer to 929.5. We're not expecting much movement on the creek because it's kind of spread out in 1/4 inch increments. So after the rain, like we usually do, with no need for proactive management of the dam at this point, but afterwards we'll evaluate water levels and the need to change discharge as we start thinking about fall drawdown. President White mentioned the closed session item that we didn't include on tonight's agenda, and I just remind the board that mediation for the Lattice litigation scheduled for August 22nd. I believe that's something that President White's going to be participating in. Mediation statements are going to be filed tomorrow, and then we'll report back, of course, after mediation occurs. Couple of other points of interest.
Could we get copies of those mediation statements?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we'll make sure the board gets a copy of that tomorrow. Mike, will you, or I guess Louis, make a note of that and make sure I don't forget. In regards to our engagement down in Minneapolis, I just wanted to let the board know, and I can circulate this as an information item too, but we recently received a letter from the Cedar Isles Dean Neighborhood Association, CIDNA. It's addressed to me, copied the mayor of Minneapolis, Councilmember Cashman, Commissioner Schaefer regarding flash flooding along the Dean Parkway. I've responded after some coordination with staff and a touch point with President White, just letting them know that this is city and park board infrastructure, but given the partnership, we'll coordinate with Public Works, we'll coordinate with the park board, and we'll provide a cohesive response. And I think what's happening is council members and commissioners are making the rounds through this year's election cycle, so we're getting a lot of post-engagement follow-up from neighborhood groups on different water-related issues as that campaign gets underway.
Well, what's the issue there?
I can send you some geographic information because I don't have that right in front of me, Manager Miller, but through some of those larger June rains that I was referencing with the lake, the street is flooding. And so
Towards
it's
Calhoun or back? Isles or
no,
off to
it would
Cedar?
be north of Lake Street, so north of Bedemikoska, past the beach club there, up on the parkway.
The water table is so high there, they had to fill in the
Yep.
garage underneath one of those new apartment buildings.
Yeah, right. There's a whole litigation
so
around that and the low pit.
there's
One
no
thing that-
solution.
This is a little bit further north, but that whole area, Cedar Isles, Damacoska, like further north of Damacoska is that very high groundwater, former wetlands that have been filled in, developed. So there's high groundwater, but then the issue of the conveyance is simply surcharge and the pipes and catch basins not having enough capacity. So when you get a rain, I think over 3 inches like we did in June, there's flash flooding, and then you can't get to your car, the water's up above the door.
The houses are 20 feet higher than the street, so.
Yeah, so it's street flooding and sort of pedestrian safety type issues.
That letter written to you?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was addressed to me and then copied all those other folks.
And they were all the stakeholders that we work with on our team.
Yeah, so it's from Kirk Bush, chair of SIDNA, to me copying all those other folks. And I think what's happening, like I mentioned, Manager Olson, is Commissioner Schaefer's running for Councilmember Cashman's seat. So I think that there's been a lot of community meetings around water. We got invited to different town hall meetings hosted by Councilmember Cashman, Commissioner Schaefer for Isles not too long ago to address vegetation and algal blooms and those sorts of things. And then following that, we get a lot of the follow-up. Because I think the partnership's being marketed. So it's like, oh, the partnership might take a look at this. It's flooding. And then we're sort of bringing that back into the middle with Angie Kraft and Public Works and Michael Schroeder, and then providing the appropriate response.
I'm asking that question as you've earned it. The idea that all these groups are getting together and forming an organization and saying James is the most effective leader.
I don't think that's what's happening.
Well,
I really don't. I don't think it's that.
I believe that there are some people who jump on things and get things done, and there are other people who take longer.
I think we've got a lot of exposure with Commissioner Schaefer, Councilmember Cashman, and electeds through the partnership. And because we've convened the partnership, we get all the follow-up. I think that's what it is.
My point. Thank you.
Benefit of a partnership.
Yeah. I mean, it's great because we get to keep our ear to the rail and we understand what the local issues are, and we're able to figure out and sort through which ones might be opportunities for it to work on and which ones aren't, which is the whole point. So it's just a filtering process. Speaking of convening, we recently convened a meeting with the Minneapolis Park and Rec Board staff, Three Rivers staff, regarding the possibility to collaborate on stream improvement project, stream restoration at Meadowbrook Golf Course. This is something the board's been tracking for a while, as in our capital improvement plan, is something that we've looked at in the past. That stream restoration, wetland restoration project could improve golf play, improve some of the infrastructure for the course that the park board's interested in. And then it has the possibility of creating a potential connection for regional trail in the future from the Minnehaha Creek Greenway down into the city of Edina. So it was a great meeting. I get to learn a little bit about Three Rivers Park District's long-range trail planning, federal funding that they'll be chasing in 2026, which they believe is still going to be there, and then talked about the park board process for vetting some concepts and maybe bringing those forward to the park board yet later this year. Manager Miller and others were discussing the Preserve Boardwalk. I wanted to report out that Granite Ray, the bond company, has elected to proceed under paragraph 4.4 of the bond, and this is after, you'll recall that we terminated the contract with JTS and moved to default on the performance bond due to some of the construction issues. Under paragraph 4.4, basically says that after investigation, bond company can determine the amount for which it would be liable to the owner, that's us, and then as soon as practical, after that point in time, they would tender payment or deny liability in whole or in part, and then give us the reason. So that's the direction that they're going. That we recently participated in an on-site inspection, and so Granite Ray is contracted with Encompass Engineering and hired a forensic structural engineer. We met with Encompass and Granite Ray's counsel. Our counsel, Chuck Holtman, was there. Our engineer, SRF, the contractor, and their attorney were there. We showed up to provide a briefing and a binder with all of the substantive project information, including the complete defective work list, a presentation, the PowerPoint presentation, the issues, which I was pleased to see the forensic structural engineer already had a copy of and was already familiar with. And then city, unfortunately, just due to scheduling, wasn't able to be there, but they were kind enough from the chief building official to provide us a letter that we were able to deliver to Encompass and the bond company, just noting that they can't close out the building permit for this project without all of the fixes being brought into compliance with building code. And so that's the city's perspective. We walked the boardwalk, we reviewed some of the test sections, and Encompass got a real hands-on visual of the core issues with those inverted hangers that require the boardwalk to be lifted up to see what the problems are, which is really going to drive the bulk of the cost and labor in the repairs. So hopefully that left an impression on them as they're formulating opinions of cost. Next steps, Encompass is going to continue its inspection in the coming weeks, so they're going to be out there a couple more times. As they do that, they'll inform us. We'll be there as needed. We're going to make sure that the city has an opportunity to have some face time with the forensic structural so that they can share their perspective face-to-face. And then in parallel with that, we're having conversations with SRF and our council about preparing the bid process so that we might get actual market costs that we could feed into the process yet. That would be a bit of a sprint, but we're meeting on that in the near future.
Once they give us a bid, do we get a chance to counteroffer?
I'll let Lewis speak to the legal framework of how we'd negotiate with Ray.
I would, Madam President, Manager Maxwell, I would liken it to dealing with any insurance company on a claim. You may go back and forth.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, I thought maybe it was just final or go to, the other part, to take us to court or something. We have a chance to counteroffer for X amount of dollars.
Yeah, it involves the parties explaining their point of view and working through it.
Thank you.
That's where we think having.
Yeah.
Okay. This is sort of a smorgasbord tonight. I think I'll finish with, we did receive, and the board will be getting follow-up from legal counsel on this, but we did receive a request for public data. We talked about that earlier on Matters from the Floor, a Data Practice Act request. This is a different one. The request is for the last year of communications regarding 325 Blake Road, so back to July 31st last year, including those that we, as an organization, staff and board, have made to city elected officials and staff, those with Alatus, those about 325, and also any communications about Hopkins staff or Hopkins elected officials. At the request of the person that's making the inquiry, we're doing an initial scan at the moment, which we're working through staff to just get an estimate of page count, an estimate of cost. That's going to be provided back to them before we fulfill the request to see if they want to focus the scope of it or if they want us to proceed. So I'll look for some communications on that coming from council in the not too distant future. And then we've been making the rounds. We had a discussion in committee about relationship management and engagement and working closely with our municipal partners. The policy planning team, so Becky and her team, with the Land and Water Partnership crew and Outreach, James O'Brien, have been conducting our annual meetings. And so far, we've met with the City of St. Louis Park, MnDOT, Shorewood, Chanhassen, Plymouth, Wayzata Mound, Deep Haven, and Greenwood. Next on deck, we're going to be having a joint meeting with all the Long Lake Creek cities. So Medina, Long Lake, Orono is a trio, and Minnetrista and Minnetonka, and then working out schedules for all of the others. Sentiments are positive. I think people understand who the Watershed District is, what we stand for, how we can help. A lot of our emphasis is on what they need and the issues that they're facing, as well as where we're going with our 2027 plan around regional and integrated flood risk reduction. So some of the things that we're hearing there, which I think some of it we know, but it's validating, is the experience around flooding varies greatly across cities in terms of what the impacts are, how big of a priority it is. And I think the other things that we're hearing is there's general support for our regional approach and what our role would be and would not be. And beyond that, it's just a great chance to meet with our community partners and hear what are they working on, what are their priorities. And so we're cultivating out of that a list of opportunities, areas of follow-up, potential projects, and that's something that you can expect staff to report on more fully get a chance. So what the opportunities are for future work with our communities. And that's it for tonight's administrator's report.
Thank you.
Do you have any updates on the Lost Lake dockage challenge?
Yeah, funny you should ask, and I should have added that in. I actually had a very brief conversation with Lewis about that coming into the meeting. In a roundabout way on the docking challenges, I had heard that the original plan, which had a perpendicular boardwalk or dock extend from the proposed townhomes out to the channel, put down multi-user docks. That was something that the DNR, the watershed, we had a lot of discussion in this room on with the representatives, the mayor, the developer, the Lake Minnetonka Conservation District, and how that would be a challenge to permit and what the ecological concerns would be with that approach. As you mentioned, after they pivoted approach to look at putting docks slightly to the north and negotiating water access rights with a neighbor, sounds like that they've had some challenges with that. And the recent thing that I'd heard is that the DNR has granted an aquatic plant management permit to allow the removal of a ½ acre of cattails and put those docks exactly where we all discussed would be quite problematic. And so just yesterday, I had a flurry of phone calls to DNR contacts and DNR leadership to try and figure out what the chain of command and decision-making process was on that. And I can report more when I know more. It's a decision that's largely out of our control.
Thank you.
I was in the area, drove past it yesterday. They haven't started work. Townhomes look great. They're compliant. They're meeting all of our regulations, and they haven't started any of the aquatic plant management yet. But the DNR has officially issued the permit for it. Was there, did you have knowledge of on that, or it was just serendipitous that you asked that question?
It's in my distant past worrying about docks.
Okay, got it.
Thanks.
Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. We are adjourned.